In the beginning, males and females evolved so that they could come together, mate, and produce offspring. And so we believe that sex has one simple purpose: reproduction. But look closer. These are two females having sex, and these two have formed a homosexual pair bond. These octopuses are both male. And these male dolphins will probably be lifelong sexual partners. This kind of sexual behavior is not going to produce young. Yet, from seals to flies, to date, homosexual behavior has been documented in a few hundred species. Can something that seems to be widespread in nature be dismissed as irrelevant? Or do we need to think again? When we see one animal mounting another, most of us naturally assume that it's a male mounting a female. And scientists have been no different. Most Western scientists were raised on the story of Noah's Ark. To repopulate the world, there must be one male and one female of each species. The importance of reproduction was reinforced by Darwin, the father of evolutionary theory. His work led to the belief that everything an animal did was linked to improving its reproductive success. All the messages were clear. The animal kingdom must be heterosexual. It's not surprising that many early field zoologists who witnessed homosexual behavior chose to ignore it and concentrate on heterosexual sex. In 1892, one report that did document homosexual behavior in elephants carefully protected itself by stating, "Elephants are committing vices and crimes of sexuality prohibited by the rules of Christianity." But what is and what isn't homosexual behavior? One interpretation defines it in animals as genital contact or stimulation, courtship or pair bonding between individuals of the same sex. However, it's a strictly behavioral definition, regardless of motivation or consent. If that's what you see, that's what it is. But while some zoologists chose to ignore homosexual behavior, others were unaware of its existence. Male on top of female? Possibly. You might catch a female laying eggs, but you'd soon lose her in this crowd. It's impossible to tell these penguins apart. In 1922, 5 king penguins were captured and taken to Edinburgh Zoo. On the basis of their sexual behavior, they were named. After 7 years, the zoo finally accepted that something was seriously wrong and got their penguins sexed. Overnight, Andrew became Anne, while the happy couple Eric and Dora became the embarrassing Erica and Dora. The problematic Bertha and Caroline became the equally problematic Bertrand and Charles. So king penguins show some homosexual behavior, and so do the killer whales which share their remote Antarctic home. We know this because we can distinguish the males by their large dorsal fin. Yet as recently as 1980, a US government document removed all references to homosexual behavior from a report on killer whales. Since it was documented by scientists over 200 years ago, the study of homosexual behavior in wildlife has been the science which dare not speak its name. Even now, it's only just beginning to whisper. In the same bay frequented by the killer whales is a colony of elephant seals. In the Antarctic summer, they come together to mate and breed. But for more than 2/3 of the year, males and females lead separate lives out at sea. Separation of the sexes was one of the early theories used to explain homosexual behavior. If there were no females available, then males went for second best, another male. But in the breeding season, the males are only interested in heterosexual sex. So much so that they will risk their lives fighting over females. The winner of the battle, the beachmaster, wins mating rights to all these females. The loser gets nothing. All he can do is take the equivalent of a cold shower. At the end of the breeding season, the beachmaster and his females head out to sea, but their pups stay behind, waiting to develop their protective blubber. They haven't been totally abandoned. The bachelor males are still around. Unfortunately for the pups, these males make terrible babysitters. For the entire season, they've been prevented from mating with the females. Now they take their frustration out on the pups. They're obviously not consenting, but they have no choice. This kind of behavior has been used to suggest that in animals, one partner in any homosexual situation is always non-consenting. But these bulls force themselves on both male and female pups, and in elephant seals, even adult heterosexual behavior can seem aggressive. If we studied only elephant seals, we might conclude that all homosexual behavior in animals is violent and non-consenting. We only have to travel deeper into the Antarctic ice to a colony of leopard seals to find that this is far from the truth. The male leopard seal is a ferocious hunter, and yet males form homosexual pairs which can only be described as gentle and affectionate. They are very tactile creatures, always nuzzling and nibbling each other. These two males, recognizable by the bump on their abdomen, appear to be consenting freely to courtship. After a bout of foreplay, they begin to dance. This behavior, known as pair rolling, can last for up to 15 minutes, and often climaxes with the males mounting each other. Leopard seals, like elephant seals, spend much of the year away from female company. Such separations are extremely common in mammals, but cannot account for all homosexual behavior. In Africa, for instance, male cobs spend most of their time in large bachelor herds. Although they have been extensively studied, homosexual behavior has never been reported in these male herds. But it is very common among females. During the breeding season, females visit the males in a special courtship arena. It's the female cob which chooses her male, not the other way round. And in order to check on his fitness, she keeps him on his toes. At the same time, in the same arena, remarkably similar behavior is taking place between two females. There are plenty of available males, so this behavior cannot be dismissed as opting for second best. The courtship is extremely elaborate. One female solicits another by whistling. If the second female is interested, the first uses a gesture known as foreleg kicking to delicately touch her genitals. Scientists are trained to link animal behavior to the goal of reproduction. One theory for this behavior is that it serves uniquely to excite the males. But the males frequently appear indifferent, and homosexual behavior is observed among females whether males are present or not. Another theory is that young females court others to gain sexual experience, but the evidence shows that adult females also mount each other. Their homosexual behavior does not stop female cobs from mating with the males. But having done so, they return to find other females again. The truth is that scientists have not found a convincing explanation for homosexual behavior in female cobs. This head-butting was once thought to be a female's way of refusing homosexual advances. But some scientists now think females may be competing with each other for the female of their choice. Heterosexual behavior is easily explained. It creates young. While homosexual behavior in female cobs remains a mystery, it's too important a part of a female's routine to be dismissed as a mere sideline to the real stuff of life. One scientist who chose to ignore homosexual behavior in his studies later came to regret it. From a hide high in the Canadian Rockies, Valerius Geest watched male mountain rams foreleg kicking, just like female cobs. He wrote, "To conceive of these magnificent beasts as queers was emotionally beyond me. But eventually I called a spade and admitted that rams lived in essentially a homosexual society." But whereas most female cobs also mate with males, many younger or lower-ranking mountain rams must wait till they climb the ranks before they experience heterosexual sex. Young American bison also stick to homosexual behavior, sometimes for up to 5 years. Typically, after a period of play fighting, they mount each other. Because older bulls prevent young bulls from mating with females, this behavior was interpreted as misdirected sexual frustration. But in several studies, the older bulls were removed, and although there were plenty of available females, same-sex mounts continued. Many of these early interpretations had one thing in common. Whether for practice or to excite the opposite sex, animals engaging in homosexual behavior had only one purpose: to improve their chances for future reproductive sex. Then, one group of apes emerged from their forest home in Central Africa and forced scientists to reconsider the purpose of any kind of sex. These two, gazing into each other's eyes, are male and female. But as primatologist Frans de Waal realized, bonobos will have sex with male or female partners, with young and old, while feeding or playing or carrying young. And they have sex often, all day long in fact.
Yeah, the sexual behavior of the bonobo, I think, is the most flexible sexual behavior that we know outside of the human species. I usually call bonobos pansexual, in the sense that I would never call them homosexual, because they have not an exclusive orientation at all to one sex or the other. So they use sex in all combinations of individuals, basically free for all.
Female bonobos only have young every 6 years or so, yet they have sex, whether or not they are in estrus, and even while they are pregnant or feeding young. Even the very young have sex, face to face. If any creatures are to break the long-held theory that all animal sex is somehow linked to reproduction, it is these bonobos. A favorite theory attempts to give all this sex a social purpose, linking it to dominance behavior, a high-ranking male putting a youngster in his place. But it's not the whole story for bonobos. Youngsters and low-ranking animals often mount their elders and betters, and as such, the sex often appears reciprocal. So why do bonobos spend so much time and energy having sex with so many different kinds of partner?
As far as choosing partners for sex, I think it is partly dictated by social bonds, by political strategies, and partly by tensions, because when tensions increase between bonobos, it is translated into sexual behavior. Food induces competition, and instead of fighting with each other, that's why we call them make love, not war, apes. Instead of fighting with each other, they have sex and then they share the food afterwards.
These make-love, not war apes often have sex face-to-face, a position once thought to be the sole preserve of humans. De Waal is as aware as any scientist of the dangers of making links between these highly sexual apes and humans. But there is one point he feels bonobos make very strongly.
Well, I think what the bonobo tells us is that the sexual life of close relatives of ours is extremely flexible and very rich. And so people who claim that the only function of sex can be reproduction are wrong on the bonobo and are probably very wrong on us, because sex can have multiple functions and can be very variable within a larger society.
And homosexual behavior?
It's marginalized only in certain cultures. It's almost as if, it was pushed in a corner, and as a result, people who have homosexual interests became exclusive homosexuals, whereas actually they might be bisexual, and the same is maybe true for many heterosexuals. So there's a sort of divide between the two that is maybe not naturally there, but culturally created by intolerance.
Certainly in bonobos and in other primate societies that have been studied, animals engaging in homosexual behavior do not seem to be marginalized. On the contrary, their behavior is just another part of everyday life. Deep in their forest home, bonobos prefer to make love, not war. But where the forest gives way to open savanna, lives a monkey which at first glance seems extremely aggressive. Male and female savanna baboons live side by side. There is plenty of sexual tension and competition, and with their razor-sharp teeth, males can easily inflict fatal injuries. Despite this aggression, as often as once an hour, a male meets up with another male, and instead of fighting, they partake in a homosexual greeting ritual. Some of these males will form stable partnerships or alliances, while other meetings end as casually as they began. A male looking for a partner appears to take a great risk exposing his private parts to another male. In behavior known as diddling, he puts the means to his reproductive success in the hands of another male. But the risk can be worth it, because while bonobo sex is promiscuous, these baboon partnerships can last several years. The significance of a close friend becomes clear when a rival appears. Two can face up to one, and though the more powerful rival tries to impose himself, an uneasy peace is maintained. While male baboons unite against hostile forces in partnerships that have been known to last up to 6 years, out in the open ocean, some males become partners for life. It has long been accepted that dolphins are playful, physical, affectionate creatures. They're also very sexual. These two male bottlenose may well have been together since they were young. When one partner rests, the other watches out for predators. They nurse each other when wounded and travel together in search of females. They will even share the same female, but the male-female bond is temporary. It is the male-male bond which lasts. Two male couples often meet up to form a foursome. If a dolphin dies, his widowed partner may search in vain for another single male. Sometimes the widower is welcomed by the male couple which were his part-time companions, and they form a threesome. But a widower has never been known to break an already existing male pair bond. In the Bahamas, bottlenose share the warm waters with spotted dolphins. Equally sensual and sexual, the spotted dolphins have a similar social setup. Denise Hertzing has been tracking these two communities for 16 years and has been able to study male-male and female-female couples. In dolphins, both males and females have what is known as a genital slit, and same-sex partners stimulate this slit with their beak or rostrum.
There's a behavior called beak genital propulsion, where they seem to push each other. It's probably just a form of stimulation along in the water with one dolphin's rostrum in the other dolphin's genital. Male-male and female-female.
So why are same-sex pair bonds so strong?
If same-sex behavior has the function of pleasure or social bonding, then what you've got is a mechanism, in addition to other mechanisms, that glue a society together.
Society, in this case, would seem to include more than just one species, as a bottlenose male appears to consent to homosexual behavior with a group of spotted dolphins. Sometimes the interactions between these two species are aggressive. Other times they cooperate, babysitting or joining forces against sharks. But why should there be homosexual behavior between two different species? Perhaps the same bonding which works within a group works across species which cooperate with each other. But as with so many questions in this area, research is in its infancy, and scientists are still searching for the answers. In lion society, bonds between females can also last for life. But lionesses cooperate for different reasons than dolphins. Sisters or half-sisters come together to help rear their young. Lionesses are extremely affectionate towards one another, but only occasionally do they engage in same-sex mounting. Some researchers argue that same-sex partners which come together to rear young should be considered homosexual, whether or not they actually have sex, in the same way that a male-female parenting arrangement would be considered heterosexual. These cubs have a playful family life even though they rarely see their father. If this lion sisterhood tells us anything, it is that members of the same sex working together can make great parents. The traditional model of one male and one female bringing up a family together is the exception in the animal kingdom rather than the rule. But heterosexual parenting does occur and is most commonly found in birds. But even in birds, there are exceptions. Male grey-lag geese form male-male pair bonds, and when it's time to raise the young, they team up with a female to make a trio. These goslings have 3 parents, a male couple and a mother. On the same lake, some heterosexual couples are also found bringing up young. This fascinating social mix has allowed ornithologist Philippe Carouette to compare the parenting success of heterosexual couples versus the trios.
The advantage for a trio is quite obvious. You have to look at the advantage for each individual within that group. Each bird has in effect 3 birds to look after its chicks, and thus a better defense against predators. Their chicks are much safer. Also, since the female is with 2 males, she has a higher social rank and a better chance of survival. The female also has more time to take care of the chicks and then seek food for herself.
Besides keeping watch for predators and guarding their young, the 2 males defend their territory from other ganders, a role they seem to take extremely seriously. In this particular trio, one male is dominant over the other and spends more time away defending their territory.
When he returns, he performs a triumph ceremony, both to the female and to the other male. So the group is very important. This male is very particular, because although he's dominant over the whole group, he forgets neither the female nor the male. The connection between the individuals is very strong.
But in this situation, is one male playing the role of unpaid nanny, doing all the hard work for nothing, while the other is father of the chicks?
In the trio we're following, the female only seems to mate with the dominant male. If a trio forms with 2 males of the same rank, there will be occasional fights. But in any case, as far as I know, 2 males do not mount each other.
In these cases, both males mate with the female, and so both males will father some of the young. And the goslings do better with 3 parents. So by providing same-sex parents, nature seems to have found an arrangement where everyone benefits. At the end of the breeding season, when the business of rearing young is over, the female will break away from the happy threesome. In grey-lag geese, it is the male-male pair bonds that persist and remain stable from year to year. But if nature has rules for same-sex parenting arrangements, we haven't yet found them. Goslings seem to benefit from same-sex parents, but for roseate terns, the benefits are far from obvious. Off the coast of Massachusetts, Jeremy Hatch and his research team noticed something strange. In several tern nests, there were more eggs than one female could possibly lay.
Understanding who attends nests of this kind is very difficult because you cannot tell male and female apart by looking at them. What we do in order to establish which are males and which are females is take a small sample of blood from these individuals and identify males and females from the DNA in the blood.
Once these terns are sexed, the team colour marked them. They found that the nests with several eggs were attended by 2 females, like this pair. There are more females than males on Bird Island, and 1 in every 10 nests is incubated by a female pair. These terns are also endangered, so could there be a link? In the 70s, female couples were found in several other bird species. Scientists thought that man-made chemicals in the environment might cause females to pair together. So have these female couples been affected by pollution?
A favoured explanation has been that it might be due to some estrogenic chemical introduced into the environment, but we have no good evidence for this. And one of the strong bits of evidence against this is that 100 years ago there were numerous roseate terns attending nests with 3 or 4 eggs in them.
This chemical theory has now been discredited, but if female pairs are normal, how do they fertilize their eggs?
The explanation for how female-female pairs lay fertile eggs is presumably that they copulate with males somewhere else in the colony. Because we have trios that include males, but more often than not, the females that pair together do not have a male as part of that social group that's attending the nest.
So the male is essentially just a sperm donor, and one of the females must take on the traditional male role, hunting for food. But in roseate terns, even in heterosexual pairs, the tasks are pretty much equally shared. While one bird keeps the eggs warm, the other is supposed to be away finding food. There is some evidence, however, that females have a slight tendency to prefer housekeeping to hunting. In our pair, there is one female who always seems particularly reluctant to leave her warm bed. In the end, she takes the hint. Apart from occasional squabbles about whose turn it is to get out of bed, what makes these female couples different?
The females that are paired with other females do not differ very much from those paired with males. As far as we can tell, they don't differ in size, and perhaps more interesting, they don't differ in age. One of the simplest explanations would be that these are young birds, but they're not.
So they have much in common, but are they any better or worse at parenting?
The ways that they do differ are that they lay eggs later than most of the females paired with males. They lay rather smaller eggs, and they raise young less effectively.
In fact, these female pairs have set themselves a harder task. The normal clutch size is 2 eggs. A female in a same-sex couple has to try and sit on at least 4. Then the pair has to provide food for 4 chicks instead of 2. Varying family sizes makes the task of comparing different parenting methods more complicated. But then researchers wanting an easy life should avoid this controversial subject altogether. Take the case of the scientists who traveled 2 kilometers beneath the ocean's surface to study the little-known deep-sea octopus. Imagine their excitement when they began to film the first ever mating witnessed by humans between these elusive creatures. Then imagine their shock when they realized they were watching 2 males. And the surprises were far from over. These octopuses belong to 2 different species. The little white male is trying to mate with an octopus over 4 times his size. This finding was so extraordinary that when they returned to the surface, the scientists asked the expert, Janet Voigt, to check that they'd identified the octopuses correctly.
This preserved specimen, part of the Field Museum of Natural History collections, is a conspecific. That is the same species as the white guy that was attempting to copulate with the other octopus. Now, I said it was really easy to tell males from females. If you draw an imaginary line of symmetry in between the eyes of an octopus, there's symmetrical first arms, symmetrical second arms. He had a little damage there. But on the third arms, instead of being long, tapered with suckers carried to the end, in males, that third arm is a little shorter, and the tip has got a grasper-type organ.
This third arm is the male's reproductive organ. In these unique pictures, the smaller octopus is inserting his reproductive arm under the mantle of the larger octopus and attempting to copulate. But why? Some biologists have suggested that in these depths, octopuses encounter each other so rarely that they can't afford to pass up any chance of sex. But octopuses are known to be highly intelligent and sensitive creatures, easily able to tell individuals apart. And if the smaller male made a mistake, surely the larger male would realize this and back off. But as Janet Voigt notes,
he does not seem to be at any time perturbed that the other octopus is there.
And the scientists noted that as time went on, the ventilation rate of the smaller octopus increased, suggesting heightened arousal.
Clearly, it's not going to help him pass on his genes to the next generation. This male is simply near the peak of his life, and he's gotten abundant spermatophores produced over the course of that life, and he's had few or maybe no opportunities to copulate with a conspecific female.
It's impossible to say anything more about these fascinating creatures. We simply don't know enough about their lifestyle. But even insects, whose lifestyles have been thoroughly studied, leave scientists guessing about their homosexual behavior. This is one interpretation. The female parasitic wasp is ready to mate. Her irresistible perfume is designed to attract all available males. One male dances for all he's worth, hoping to gain her consent. Another female and another male. So far, everyone's playing by the rules. But this male is getting too carried away on the dance floor. Just as the female signals her admiration, another male rushes in and claims the reward. The original suitor arrives to collect his rightful prize. Flushed with success, he doesn't notice that he's trying to mate with a male. He doesn't realize because the second male, after contact with the female, now smells like her. The first male makes increasingly frenzied attempts to copulate and wastes precious time doing so. Happily sandwiched in the middle, the second male has one more trick to play. Once the female leaves, there's a danger her original suitor might follow her. He must be detained as long as possible. The second male drops his antennae coyly, just like a female. The ruse works. The hapless loser tries again. So could homosexual behavior occur simply because a rival has been duped? It may be true for this wasp, but it doesn't explain the variety of homosexual behavior in nature. And if this behavior persists, reappearing generation after generation, then it must, so the argument goes, have a genetic basis. To study this question, scientists turn to the fruit fly, the creature whose genetic structure they know better than any other. In the wild, about 8% of these flies show some homosexual behavior. In the laboratory, a team of researchers led by geneticist Jean-François Ferveur is attempting to find a genetic marker for this behavior.
When we observe the behavior of this small fly, we find that it's extremely sophisticated. Its tiny size may make it seem unimportant, but that's simply not so, because it has the same biological functions as any vertebrate or human being.
Sophisticated though this fly is, the team has managed to modify its behavior and artificially increase the rate of homosexual behavior to 90%.
To produce these generations of flies, we inject a fragment of DNA into an embryo, thus modifying the fly's genome. And so, artificially, we reproduce homosexual behavior.
The male with the red eyes has been genetically modified. He's trying to court the white-eyed, unmodified male. The red-eyed fly licks the other's genitals. But White Eyes scorns these advances and makes a show of cleaning himself up. Red Eyes doesn't seem to notice that he's been rejected and tries again. Ferveur believes that rather than actively seeking male company, this modified fly can no longer tell the difference between males and females. So instead of finding a genetic marker for homosexual behavior, the scientists may have simply removed the male's ability to discriminate. When several modified males are put together, something extraordinary happens. They all attempt to copulate with the male in front, creating a chain of dancing males. So does this artificially produced behavior suggest that there might be a gene for homosexuality in humans?
I think if you want to simplify or compare an organism such as a fly to humans, then the only comparison you can make is that a fly itself is already complicated enough. So in humans, to simplify certain behavior to one gene, or even a series of genes, I think we're still a long way off.
As these Japanese macaques reveal, most behavior is too complex to be determined solely by genes. Learning surely has a part to play. "20 years ago, one female macaque began collecting stones and playing with them. Try as they might, scientists could think of no beneficial reason for this behavior, and yet more and more monkeys copied her. Today, most of the females in this colony play with stones. Young macaques come to recognize the troop's favorite food trees and sleeping spots from their parents. They learn to interact with the world around them in the same way. This is how the troop's unique culture is formed. Same-sex behavior forms part of that culture. Most females in this troop form intense pair bonds with other females. Paul Vasey's been studying this behavior for the past 6 years. His findings have thrown new light on the study of homosexual behavior.
When I first started studying female homosexual behavior in Japanese macaques, I was really interested in the whole question of why are the females doing this? Why are they investing so much time and energy into this behavior which doesn't seem to have any relationship to promoting reproduction? So the homosexual behavior in the female Japanese macaques represented something of a paradox when viewed from this particular perspective.
Vasey began by checking all the theories that have been put forward to explain homosexual behavior. In this colony, there seems to be no shortage of adult males looking for females. But even so, in science, everything has to be rigorously tested.
Some researchers have suggested that animals engage in homosexual behavior only in situations where they lack opposite-sex mates. What I found is that females will engage in homosexual behavior even when there are males present. And even when these males are sexually motivated, in other words, the males are soliciting them for sex, but the females still ignore the males and choose instead to engage in homosexual behavior.
So if males are sometimes present, could females be behaving in this intimate way in order to attract the male and turn him on? No, because Vasey shows that if they can, females prefer to avoid males when engaging in homosexual behavior. Typically, the pair switch back and forth between sex and grooming each other. So this behavior doesn't attract males. But what about the theory that gives sex a social function?
One of the theories that's been used to explain homosexual behavior in animals is that it's a dominance interaction. And typically this explanation suggests that dominant individuals mount subordinate ones as a way of expressing their dominance. So I looked at this idea in Japanese macaques, and what I found was that both partners participate in mounting, both partners participate in being mounted.
If both partners mount equally, could this behavior have something to do with an alliance, as suggested for baboons? For instance, when an aggressive male turns up, the females could support each other.
If natural selection had favored this behavior as an adaptation to form alliances, we would expect that females would prefer to engage in homosexual behavior with the most powerful allies possible. That's not the case. Females don't tend to target particular dominant females, which would be valuable allies.
Finally, what about parenting? Do these female pairs protect each other's young like lions and roseate terns? The answer appears to be no. At best, females ignore their partner's young, and often they are highly aggressive towards them. So what is Vace's hypothesis to explain the macaque's homosexual behavior?
Most of my research has shown that there is no social function to the homosexual behavior. What my research does show is it seems that females are engaging in the behavior simply because it's sexually pleasurable.
If females do engage in homosexual activity for their own pleasure, where does that leave the males? The homosexual behavior in these females does not stop them engaging in heterosexual sex, and therefore does not appear to affect reproduction. They are bisexual, consorting briefly with a favored male before returning to partnership with their chosen female. This behavior holds for the animal kingdom generally. Most animals that engage in homosexual behavior are at some time also heterosexual. By suggesting that the main purpose of this behavior is simple pleasure, Vace knows he's going out on a limb. Scientists, taught to look for beneficial reasons for behavior, are wary of suggesting that adult animals might simply be enjoying themselves. Link homosexual behavior and pleasure, and you have an explosive mix. To gain access to a certain female, males not only have to chase off other males, but also her female partner. He gets his female. If Vace had suggested that heterosexual behavior is pleasurable, it wouldn't seem so controversial, because pleasure in this case has a reproductive goal. Vace's work has put the sex back into homosexual behavior. And if pleasure, pure and simple, is important for macaques, could it be part of the story for other animals too? The answer is that until these ideas are tested by scientists, we just don't know. But what could be more pleasurable than a hot bath on a freezing cold day? These macaques live hundreds of miles further north. They have adapted to enjoy hot baths. Often, adaptation is a key to survival. But what if this adaptation is for pleasure? Might this also be true of sex? In primates, homosexual behavior is non-existent in some species, occasional in others, and, in these Japanese macaques, very common. Compare totally different species, and it seems that when it does occur, homosexual behavior in animals exists for many different reasons. Since Darwin's time, people have looked at the natural world in search of answers about themselves. But homosexual behavior in a few hundred species is a mere drop in the vast ocean of animal behavior. This is a science in its infancy, and each year, as more cases come to light, more questions are raised. Perhaps all that can be said is that homosexual behavior is as fascinating and diverse and complex as any other kind of behavior. And as such, it surely has to be worth studying, like any other form of natural behavior. For only when we can observe homosexual behavior in animals with open eyes and open minds can we even begin to ask the popular question, what does all this mean for us?